Fast forward a few years, and I suppose one of the biggest events, I suppose if you could call it that he is known for was the burning of the giant pile of ivory. I understand you were actually involved in that as well.
Yes, when I had just finished my bachelor's degree, and before burning the ivory, we needed to know, well, how much was it? And actually the scientists were very interested in, so where did these elephants come from and how old were they? And so my job was to mobilize a team of students, volunteers, to actually do the stock take. So we measured every single tusk and we identified if it was male or female. And from the size of the tusk, we could get the age. Plus, we knew when that tusk was seized. So we had really good information about the profile of elephants over that time. So he was very trusting. I was very young. And even after doing that and finishing my master's degree, I then started my own PhD on elephants. And when I spoke to him about elephants, and I was just, an early graduate student, I didn't know that much about elephants at all, but he took me very seriously. He gave a lot of time to people who had ideas, and he would call me to his office and he'd sit me down and say, so what's happening? What do you think I should do about this? I was only 26 years old when he said, okay, I need you to stall your PhD, take a year off, come and work for me, and lead the program to prevent the reopening of the ivory trade. And this work involved raising the funds, millions of dollars, organizing the government, all the government agencies around our policy and campaign as a country, working with all of the international donors and support groups. It was an amazing moment in history where, and I realized I felt very special, but actually he did this with a lot of people. Once he trusted you and he believed that you could deliver on something, he would throw responsibility at you. And I remember once walking into his office and I was telling him, I can't do this, I'm too young, nobody's taking me very seriously, because I was dealing with senior government officials. And he was like, oh, don't be ridiculous, just go and do it. So he was an amazing mentor in that sense. He didn't try to stop you from experimenting and trying different things out, but he was very forgiving of mistakes if they were genuine mistakes.
When we look at the situation now, what happens now after his death? What about the challenges that Kenya is facing now? Are they the same challenges that he was battling with, or has it changed?
Well, so much has changed, of course. Richard was very, very good as an institution builder. He created the Kenya Wildlife Service, which is still one of the most prominent wildlife authorities in the entire continent. And it's headed by Kenyans, and it has, it does all kinds of work way beyond just management of protected areas. So he's left a very strong institution. There are challenges, but, it would be a disaster, I think, if it hadn't been created. He also created the Turkana Basin Institute to continue his work in paleontology. That institute is run by some phenomenal people, and they're now teaching courses in the universities, which it never happened before. And his other big passion in politics, he influenced so many courageous politicians. And with me, he started Wildlife Direct, the organization that I now run. In the very early days, he asked me to join him because he didn't really know anything about the internet or how it worked. And so he asked me to come and help him with the storytelling. How do we tell stories that will encourage any visitor who comes to Kenya to want to support the conservation of our wild species? Because he felt very deeply that people come, they fall in love with the country, they fall in love with the animals and the places and the people, but there is no way they can help. There is no structure or system for them to help. And he said, what if we don't have to create a huge trust fund of tens of millions of dollars? What if the trust fund lives in everyone's pocket and all we want is $1 a month? He said, and you can appeal to all these people who come and they continue to give because they have a direct connection with the places where they send the money. That was his big dream. And Wildlife Direct has grown from strength to strength, taking on major national and international challenges like trade in ivory, fighting against the pesticide poisoning of our raptors and lions. And we've become the only conservation organization in the whole continent that produces stories in the form of wildlife films. We're the only Africans making wildlife documentaries.
It sounds like you are really going to miss him.
Yeah, well, we all will. I think, I've been reading all of the tributes on social media, and it's phenomenal how many people he interacted with on a personal level and helped.
Dr. Paula Kahumbu, the CEO of Wildlife Direct there. As always, we love to hear from you. Our email address is world.business@bbc.co.uk. Do get in touch, particularly if you've been affected by any of the topics we've been talking about today. Apple becoming a $3 trillion company and the relationship it has with its customers. Also, the infrastructure bill in the United States, with comments from communities hoping to benefit. And also the legacy of the paleoanthropologist Richard Leakey. Do send us your thoughts. This programme was produced by Claire Williamson and edited by Martin Webber. I'm Sasha Twining. Until next week, thanks for listening.
This is the BBC World Service. And on the inquiry this week, drug use in prisons is a long-term problem, but one which undermines the very purpose of the corrections system. This week, we're asking, can we get drugs out of prisons? The inquiry at bbcworldservice.com/inquiry. And at bbcworldservice.com, Sporting Witness.
We head to Afghanistan, to the remote, rugged mountains of Bamiyan province. In 2011, these soaring peaks became the backdrop of something unlikely and uplifting in this struggling war-torn country. Because Bamiyan is where Afghan skiing was born.
This is the BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
Welcome to News Hour from the BBC World Service. I'm Audrey Brown. There's been a sharp upward revision in the number of casualties from last week's violence in Kazakhstan. The Deputy Minister of Defense says the situation is under control.
At present, the counter-terrorist operation continues on the territory of the Republic of Kazakhstan. It will continue until the complete elimination of terrorists.
Another Chinese city locks down after a coronavirus outbreak. What impact does the country's zero-COVID approach have on the economy? A court in Australia is about to hear Novak Djokovic's appeal against deportation. His supporters say he shouldn't have been put in this position.
I don't think that's fair. We are just hoping that he will be allowed to play.
And are the Golden Globes losing their shine as Hollywood stars shun the award ceremony over a lack of diversity in its choices? That's after the news.
BBC News with Sue Montgomery. The mayor of New York City says at least 19 people have died in a massive fire in an apartment building in the Bronx area. Mayor Eric Adams said 9 of the dead were children. The commissioner of the city's fire department, Dan Nigro, said firefighters had found victims in stairways on every floor of the 19-story building, many in cardiac arrest. He said at least 63 people were injured, half of them severely. He said the injuries were predominantly smoke inhalation and victims had been taken to 5 different hospitals.
People were transported to 5 different hospitals, and we're tallying those numbers. The marshals will be in there, and I'm certain they will determine a cause. It is not suspicious at this point.
New York officials are calling it the city's worst fire in over 30 years. West African leaders have agreed to impose harsh sanctions on Mali, including closing borders with Mali and sweeping economic measures. Naomi Sherber-Ball has more details.
West African leaders have called for a return to civilian rule since a group of army officers toppled President Keita during street protests in August 2020. Mali's military rulers now say elections could take 5 years, a delay the West African bloc deems unacceptable. Sanctions have been seen to be effective in the past, but a second coup last year forced out the interim civilian government, testing the resolve of regional leaders pushing for reform. Last month, more than a dozen Western countries condemned what they called the deployment of Russian mercenaries to Mali.
Kyrgyzstan has lodged a protest with the Kazakh ambassador over the detention in Kazakhstan of a well-known Kyrgyz jazz musician after video footage emerged apparently showing him in custody and badly beaten. Here's Danny Eberhard.
Kazakh state television has shown footage of Vikram Ruzakunov, his face bruised and swollen. In it, he appears to admit to taking part in the protests, but his relatives believe it to be a forced confession, alleging he's been tortured. They say the jazz musician regularly plays concerts in Kazakhstan's main city, Almaty, the focus of the worst violence, and had been invited there for that purpose. The incident has sparked anger in Kyrgyzstan and a protest outside the Kazakh embassy. The Kyrgyz government has called for Mr. Ruzakunov's prompt release.
The host of football's Africa Cup of Nations, Cameroon, have begun their campaign with a victory against Burkina Faso in the first match of the tournament, sending a jubilant crowd onto the streets of the capital, Yaoundé. In today's other encounter, Cape Verde beat Ethiopia. The Confederation of African Football has issued strict rules concerning COVID outbreaks, which have already hit several teams. BBC News. The Saudi-led coalition in Yemen appears to have used fake footage to bolster its claims that Houthi fighters have a major weapons stockpile in the port of Hodeidah. Footage displayed during a presentation showed a large missile in a warehouse. Yemeni journalists in Sana'a say it dates back to a documentary on the U.S. invasion of Iraq in 2003. A Qatari women's rights activist who's been missing for several months has reappeared on social media, saying she's fine and well. A smiling Nouf al-Madid has posted several videos of herself on a newly opened account on Twitter. There had been rumours she may have been arrested. Iraq's new parliament has held its first session since elections in October. MPs re-elected the former speaker, but things did not go smoothly. Here's Sebastian Usher.
MPs showed up for their first session as Iraq's new parliament in a variety of guises. The biggest political group known as the Sadrists, after their leader, the Shia cleric Muqtada al